See, words is are a form of action. We don't have a code, all right? Every prisoner in a prisoner of war should have a code. In fact, when you are captured as a prisoner of war, they say you give what? In some armies, not in all, but they say you give your name, rank, and serial number. That's it. I mean, you don't say nothing else. Name, rank, and serial number. You give your name, you give your rank. If you are supposed to be in captivity and whatnot, and you're a soldier, because you're supposed to be fighting against being captured, you didn't have no business being captured in the first place, based on color. Captured, you know, and thrown on a ship, and your ancestors all thrown on a ship, and then taken somewhere where you don't know where you're going or what you're going to be doing when you get there. That's your legacy. And no truce in this war, because that was war, has ever been called. No peace treaty has ever been signed. So we're still prisoners of war, because that was war. When you take somebody and put a rope around their neck or a chain and put their chains around their ankles and whatnot and drag them somewhere, and then generations and generations and generations, and then you tell them that they are free, but you weren't telling the truth, because when you're free, you give a person compensation. You put a person on their feet. You know, prisoners are entitled to that. All right, prisoners of war. I mean, you know, when they're released, they have what they call compensatory setups, restitution. You build up the people that you have destroyed. They haven't done that. They have resisted that all the way, and say, just go for yourself. Like I think it was Mr. Floyd McKissick years ago, who said the slaves wasn't free, they were fired. And so I looked at that and I said, hey, go one step farther on that. So I said the slaves not only weren't free, they were not only fired, they were transferred. You know, and that's the way it's been ever since. We're being transferred, just shuffle around. Right now, people are being moved out of the places where they stay. Right here in Washington, D.C., or right across the land, I've been told. I mean, given 24 hours notice. Keep moving. Keep them squatters moving. Squatters, you know, we're supposed to be citizens. But we just shuffle around. But when I came on the air just a few minutes ago, we were talking about schools. This is not 1957. This is not 1955. In the Northwestern Hemisphere, it was supposed to be an empire of people who have tons of money to burn, food to throw away. And you have people arguing about, on the basis of color, education, second area of activity, like I have listed in my book. Here, it's 2017. We're arguing about the same issues that existed in 1940 or 1955 or 1957. And so, oh yes, collectively, because your question was what we'll do collectively. We should tap into the one thing that we haven't been doing. We need a code for these prisoners of war, which is what we are. A code meaning certain things you do, certain things you don't do. And in this specific instance, because we got to get down to solutions. When someone asks me, just like I'm being asked about this gentleman, I say he's doing what he's doing. Well, what do you think about what he said about it? He said what he said. See, that's a standard answer. That's a codified answer. Some years ago, someone asked me about a very prominent minister who gave what some people said was a very scathing speech. I mean, you know, it made a lot of black people nervous and whatnot, about racism and whatnot. And they said, well, Fuller, what do you think about what this minister said the other day? You know, what do you think about it? I said, I think he said what he said. See what I mean? I stuck right to the code. They say, well, what do you think about what he said? I said, I think about he said what he said. So you don't deviate. That's what a code is about. Once you lock on to what works, you don't move 1 inch from it, word for word. And see, we need a code for everything. Whereas we go around trying to reinvent the wheel every time something happens. Well, let's have a debate about this. No, if we have a code, we already know what to say, and that's where you get your unity. Because all unity in an army, in a prison camp, in a school, all unity on a job comes from having a code. Meaning what? When you do it, it works. It always works. Otherwise, it doesn't have any business being a code. So what do you do in ingredients in a code for thought, speech, and action? You know exactly what to say and what not to say anytime anything happens. And you always say the same thing until it doesn't work. Then you go back to the drawing board. But as long as it works, as long as it's logical, and this is why we should get away from the emotional part in trying to write a code, which is what I've tried to attempt to do with the book that I put out, the textbook for victims of white supremacy, to be a sort of a blueprint, the beginning of a blueprint. Because the code doesn't end until all problems are solved. So you say, what's the best thing to say when you have to say something? On a job or anything, what is the very best thing that can ever be said when something happens on your job? And you try to find that out. That takes a lot of thinking. You might have to think for months or for years. Like in some things that I put in my textbook, I had to think about it for years. Like when people started talking about saluting the flag or saying a pledge to the flag. What's the best thing to do if you're black? What's the very best thing that you can do that is foolproof, that nobody can assail and make sense? Nobody can criticize it and make sense, because everything that you do, if it's logical and constructive, has to make sense. So I'm going to go back to what I said again before we lose that train of thought. When they asked me about this gentleman, if someone would come and ask me, what do you have to say about what he did? Mr. Fuller, or Puller, or Dumbbell Puller, or whatever you want to call me. Call me anything. I'm going to pay attention to the question. And I'm going to say, I think that he said what he said. And I'm not deviating from that. And you can ask me about Reverend Jesse Jackson or Dr. Dick Gregory, who just passed away. Well, what do you think about what he said back in 1977 or something like that? And I got the same answer. Dr. Dick Gregory said whatever he said. And then, after you ask me 2 or 3 times and I give that same answer, then I'm going to say, may I ask you a question? Because I'm going to get permission to ask the question first. And if the person says yes, I'll say, what do you think about what he said, sir? What do you think about what he said? You're asking me about what some other victim of white supremacy said about racism. What do you say? And in particular, if I'm talking to a white person, you're asking me, and I'm going to give you an answer, because I'm supposed to have an answer for all questions. That's codification too. Even if the answer is I don't know, that's an answer. But the correct answer, I think, for any non-white person, anywhere on the planet, any time of day or night, and they ask me about something that some other non-white person said about racism, the answer is always, he said what he said. She said what she